I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hi, I'm Luke Ryan for JoBlo.com and welcome to Movie Endings Explained, where we'll be taking a look at some of the more ambiguous and discussed movie endings that have left audiences debating their true meaning long after the credits have rolled. In 1980, visionary film director Stanley Kubrick delivered his new movie, The Shining, based on the 1977 novel of the same name by legendary author Stephen King. Widely regarded these days as one of the greatest horror movies of all time, the reception when it was released was a little bit different to say the least. Critics were mixed, and Kubrick was even nominated for a Razzie for Worst Director. Stephen King was allegedly bound by contract to not criticize the film publicly, but in later years began filtering out his opinion on Kubrick's interpretation of his book, more recently in the foreword to his sequel novel to The Shining in 2013, Dr. Sleep. He said, "Stanley Kubrick's movie, which many seem to remember, for reasons I have never quite understood, as one of the scariest films they have ever seen. If you have seen the movie but not read the novel, you should note that Dr. Sleep follows the latter, which in my opinion is the true history of the Torrance family." Kubrick, ever the auteur, wasn't content to just transpose the novel to the screen as is, and found his own interpretation of the story and characters. The Shining follows Jack Torrance, along with his wife Wendy and son Danny, as they move into the Overlook Hotel for the winter, with Jack stepping into the role of the off-season caretaker in the empty mountaintop hotel. As the family unit begin to adjust to the isolation of living at the Overlook, Jack takes the opportunity to pursue his writing ambitions. Slowly but surely, strange things begin to happen at the hotel, and Jack begins to slip into madness. His son Danny has a special power, which the hotel chef Halloran senses telepathically, revealing to the young boy that he has it too. The manager of the Overlook Hotel warned Jack before he took the job that the previous caretaker Charles Grady couldn't handle the position, and after succumbing to cabin fever murdered his family and killed himself. But there seems to be more than just the spectre of Charles Grady looming over the hotel, as the Torrance family discovers. Apparent ghosts appear to Jack, especially in the Gold Room, where time seems to wind back, and where Jack seems to have stepped back with it. By the end of the story, Jack has completely surrendered to either his own murderous tendencies coupled with cabin fever, or perhaps the psychotic and supernatural collective of the Overlook Hotel itself. After unsuccessfully attempting to murder his own family, Jack ends up freezing to death following a chase with Danny around the snowy maze outside the hotel. So, what's there to really explain? Well, the film is supernatural, and beyond even those elements, there are so many details to explore in Kubrick's version of The Shining. Books have been written about it, and films have been made solely based around the many theories that have sprouted up since the film's release. As complex and dense as the psychology and supernatural elements of The Shining can be, and to a further degree can be read into, the actual quote-unquote ending of the film is a quiet, haunting, and baffling one. Inside the hotel, the camera slowly pans in on a wall full of picture frames. Eventually we see, centered in the frame, a photograph from a July 4th celebration dated in 1921, and at the front of the group of revelers, Jack Torrance stands, smiling like a Cheshire cat. At first you wonder if it really is Jack, and then the shot fades into a closer view, so that there can be no mistaking it. There is Jack Torrance at the Overlook Hotel 60 years ago. So what does it all mean? One theory is that the hotel is its own omnipotent presence that absorbed Jack's essence, which is why he appears in the photograph. He wasn't able to free himself from its grasp, and now his spirit is trapped forever inside the hotel, and indeed the photograph. Another theory is that Jack is reincarnated, but that itself could take many different forms as an idea. Many believe that Jack's soul is forever caught in a reincarnation loop, and that he always ends up at the hotel, bound to a murderous end. During the sequence with Jack in the Gold Room bathroom, he encounters Delbert Grady, a butler, who offers this chilling line of dialogue.
Mr. Grady, you were caretaker here. I'm sorry to differ with you, sir. But you are the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker. I should know, sir. I've always been here.
The implication that Jack has always been the caretaker is certainly a head-scratcher, and a lot of times, working out the exact particulars can ruin the eerie effect of such haunting ideas in movies. Stanley Kubrick had this to say about analysing the supernatural in films. A story of the supernatural cannot be taken apart and analysed too closely. The ultimate test of its rationale is whether it is good enough to raise the hairs on the back of your neck. If you submit it to a completely logical and detailed analysis, it will eventually appear absurd. In the original ending of the film, which was changed quite a bit from the novel, we were to get an epilogue showing Wendy and Danny recuperating in a hospital to assure the audience that they had survived. The manager of the Overlook Hotel, Stuart Ullman, tells Wendy that the hotel was investigated thoroughly by the police. He says they didn't find the slightest evidence of anything at all out of the ordinary, and it's perfectly understandable for someone to imagine such things when they've been through something like you have. Given the fact that Halloran was brutally murdered, this raises yet another question, and includes Ullman as another piece in the mysterious puzzle of the Overlook Hotel's dangerous power. Thus, the scene was removed by Kubrick, though a few Polaroid images survived. Another element to the ending that was also removed was a title card over the photograph shown of Jack in 1921 that was to read, "The Overlook Hotel would survive this tragedy, as it had so many others." We had learned of one tragedy taking place with the man who murdered his family some years ago, but many others implies, well, many others. In one early iteration of the script, Jack finds a scrapbook in the hotel filled with clippings of the many tragedies that had taken place there, but it was never filmed. Yet another theory is that Jack becomes possessed up to a point, as does every caretaker who arrives, and that the ghostly inhabitants begin to see him as the everlasting caretaker. But we see Jack very clearly in the photograph. It's meant to be him, and it's meant to, as Kubrick said, raise the hairs on the back of your neck. He only ever briefly addressed this aspect of the film, saying this: "The ballroom photograph at the very end suggests the reincarnation of Jack." So that's about as official as it can get. The explanation, as per the director, is that Jack was reincarnated. In the novel, Jack ends up dying in an explosion due to a faulty boiler, which Kubrick found to be very cliched, instead looking for a more interesting end to his version of the story. And yet, Kubrick didn't actually write the film by himself. It was co-written with Diane Johnson, who had this to say about the film's conclusion. There is an explanation for the photo, though it's a bit strange and paradoxical because it's both real and unreal. The idea that Jack was always at the hotel in some earlier incarnation. Jack had somehow been the creature of the hotel through reincarnation. At the same time, we're meant to experience it in the now. There's no way of resolving that. It's meant to be magical. So, in the case of The Shining, I believe it really is best to go more with the feeling of the reveal at the end, as opposed to the logic, because it really is difficult to make complete sense of it. Some feel that there were only ever two Jacks, that the Jack we see in the film is a reincarnation of the man in the 1921 photo, with the concept of doubles being read into through many scenes in the film. Though this would mean that the photo with Jack in 1921 would have always been there, and you would have thought that someone would have noticed. It could even be that the Phantom Butler was merely trying to nudge the insanity that was building up within Jack just that little bit further. Just because someone says something doesn't mean it's true, especially not a ghost. Maybe Jack was never really there before, but much like the previous caretaker who murdered his family, he was sucked into the evil that permeates the Overlook Hotel, and by the conclusion, he was bound to the place forever. immortalized in a snapshot, his spirit encapsulated in a chilling smile that hides a horrifying past. What do you think of the ending to The Shining? Do you have your own interpretation, or do you prefer not to read into it so literally? Let us know in the comments down below, and stay tuned for more original content on the JoBlo Videos channel, and thanks for watching.